Alright, if you have a Bible or if you have a smartphone, turn to the book of Jonah. The book of Jonah. If you don't have one, I'm sure Justin's got a Lost and Found. You can find a really good Bible in there. Just keep it. They won't even know it's missing. But Jonah is right after Obadiah and right before Micah. You can look in your table of contents. It's fine. What? What is it? 12:51 in your Bibles. 12:54. 4:51. So. You must have a different Bible than me because mine's 1687. All right. I need you to raise your hand. Raise your hand if you've heard of the book of Jonah or the story of Jonah. Just so I can know. Okay? Alright, so we got some people that may not know. That's awesome. Alright, so my goal, guys, this week and next week is to show you what the Bible says about the book of Jonah and the story of Jonah. The main idea, if you don't hear anything else, I want you to hear this, is that God's salvation is a free gift to you and your enemies. God's salvation is a free gift to you and your enemies. So, how many of you have ever been in a situation where somebody told you to do something and you did the absolute opposite? Some of you, that was probably this morning. Your mom was like, hey, put on deodorant. You're like, no. Some of you your parent might have given you like a piece of broccoli and they're like, don't you eat that. And you're like, okay, I'm not. So you're doing the complete opposite. You're rebelling. But the story of Jonah, can this really be true? Could this actually happen? Could a person be thrown in the water and a giant fish eat it? Yes. And then could that fish spit him out and then live? I'm here to tell you tonight that the book of Jonah is 100% true. It's 100% true and it can be trusted. The Bible, guys, is absolutely error-proof. There is nothing wrong, there's nothing factual in it. We can absolutely trust it. And the book is only in entirety, it's only 48 verses long. 48 verses. That is not a lot. You can read this in like 5 minutes. It's a very, very simple read. The main character as well, who do you think the main character in the book of Jonah is? You would be wrong. No. It's not the fish. The main character in the book of Jonah is God. Alright? God is absolutely the main character, and we're going to find out why. So, everybody look in verse 1 in your Bible. We're going to dig in real quick. It says, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it. For their evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. So there's some things that we need to know about Jonah. The first thing is he was a Jewish prophet in the northern tribe of Israel. A prophet back then was a person who received direct revelation from God. So God said it, they digested it in, and then they went and told people. And a lot of times, prophets gave bad news. It was condemnation is coming, judgment is coming, and it was not a fun job to be a prophet. But here we have Jonah, and his name actually means dove, which is actually pretty funny when you consider his story. Not very dove-like at all. But God's calling him to go nowhere near he currently is. Nineveh is going to be 550 miles away, and Tarshish is 2,500 miles in the opposite direction. So this would be as far as Charlotte, North Carolina is to Los Angeles, California, if you were to drive that far. So I want you to see for yourself in this picture right here. You see Joppa is where the ship is leaving from. So God has called him to go where? To Nineveh, right? And so he says, I'm going to Tarshish. He's going on a Mediterranean cruise in the exact opposite direction. So the place he's going to, Nineveh. What do we know about people that lived there? They were called the Assyrians. These guys were brutal. They were barbaric. They would do unspeakable things to people and force their family to watch it. The stuff that I looked up that they did I can't even tell you because it's so graphic and it's just absolutely disgusting. But one thing that they would do, I hope y'all are done eating. Unless you are. Okay. One thing they would do is when you would come into the city, they would have these poles on like a big highway. And on top of the poles would be heads from people that they killed. What do you think that conveys? If you're coming in trying to attack these guys, they're like, come at me, bro. Look at all the heads we've done killed. Let's see what you got. They were gross people. It's eerily similar to the things we see ISIS do today up in the Middle East. There's not much difference, and so Jonah knew that. The running away from God definitely makes things a lot more complex. Some of you may be in this room tonight. You may be just like Jonah. You may have your ticket to Tarshish. God is calling you to go to Nineveh. He's calling you to go to a hard place. He's calling you to do something, and you're like, I'm going to take this ticket and I'm heading out of here. You may not literally be going out of here, but spiritually you may be deserting and going exactly the opposite where God's wanting you to do. So has God ever called you to do something that's inconvenient? We hate being inconvenienced, don't we? It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, but sometimes God's timing is absolutely perfect. And in the season of life that I'm in right now, I've been inconvenienced a whole lot. But I've learned that God's timing is perfect. He is the one that's in control, and He's sovereign over our lives and over every step. The good thing about God as well is that He doesn't stop pursuing you. Even if you run, even if you try to do everything you can possibly do to get away from God, He's not going to stop pursuing you. How many of you have heard of the Apostle Paul? Has Justin ever taught you guys about that? Awesome. Yes, he used to be Saul. You name it, this guy did it. He was an absolutely terrible, terrible person. He killed people. He did all kinds of crazy things. And God didn't stop pursuing him as well, just like Jonah. But as we read in these first 3 verses, Jonah disagrees with God's desire to save evil people. And the Assyrians they were evil people. They deserved to die. They deserved all the punishment that they could possibly get. And in our eyes, they don't deserve forgiveness. They don't deserve salvation. We need to check our hearts though, because maybe somebody in this room as well. Maybe you think, hey, there's somebody that I know that I don't want them to have salvation either. They may be your quote unquote enemy. But the good thing about God is that nobody is too far gone. Look at the Apostle Paul, like I said earlier. If that dude can be saved, and that dude can tell people about Jesus, anybody can. Let's look at verse 4. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. There was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God. And they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship. He laid down and was asleep. So the captain came and said, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Rise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us, that we may not perish." The first thing I want us to notice in verse 4 is who sent the storm to Jonah? What does the Bible say? God sent this. God sent the storm? Did y'all read that right? It was God? Why would God send a storm? Y'all are smart. You're on it. All right. So this isn't any coincidence that the storm happened, right? God is on it. He knows what's happening. He can see Jonah running away. God does whatever He can to get our attention. Now, what does Jonah do when the storm comes and everybody's running around like crazy? What is Jonah doing here? That dude is sleeping. That is crazy. How many of you can sleep anywhere, anytime, for any reason? Like I feel like I'm sleeping right now in your sermon, Mark, because it's so boring right now. Hopefully it's not. But some people can do that. Like me, I can't sleep on a plane. I can't sleep in a car. I'm the kind of person, if I got 2 hours of sleep the night before and we got a 10-hour drive, my wife's like, "Hey, just go to sleep." I'm like, I can't. I just can't do it. I don't know what it is, but that's just me. Jonah's the opposite. Jonah can sleep anywhere. There's a crazy storm going on, and he's on the bottom sleeping. Now, when you think ship, don't think Titanic. Don't think anything crazy big. These are not huge ships. So it's going to be rocking. It's going to be going crazy. There's stuff falling everywhere. And what we need to know about this is that basically Jonah's saying, I'm not afraid to die. This is how I go out. I go out sleeping. So what he was doing, he was trying to turn up the noise inside and think, if I just run far enough away, God will stop. I can outrun God. Let's see what God does. Verse 7. They said to one another, come, let us cast lots. Cast lots basically means you take some die in your hand, or dice, whatever you say it, and you throw it on the ground, and whatever number it goes to, you're assigned a number. So if you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you roll a 3, you're dead. Sorry, that's the way it goes. That would be casting lots, an example of that. So they're casting lots so that we may know on whose account of evil this has come up. Because earlier, everybody's calling out to their own gods. So they're like, let's find out which god is responsible for this crazy storm. And guess who the lot fell on? Jonah, of course. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you're like, of course it's me. Of course it's me. Because why not? Why not? It's if anything else can go wrong, God, like, it's me. Verse 8. Then they said to him, tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you? Man, I'd be like, dude, I just woke up. Quit the interrogation. This is crazy. He said to them, I'm a Hebrew. I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said, what is this you have done? For the men knew he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. So in verse 11, then they said to him, what shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us? For the sea was more and more tempestuous. I think I'm saying that right. That's a big word, isn't it? Yeah. Alright, that just means crazy, it's rocking, it's violent, it's insane. He said to them, pick me up, hurl me into the sea, then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. Nevertheless, the men rowed harder to get back to dry land, but they couldn't. For the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it has pleased you. So they picked up Jonah, hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. It was perfectly still. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. So the men are going crazy. They're trying to do everything they possibly can to get this storm under wraps. And so they throw lots, and Jonah is it. Obviously, his God is the one that caused this storm. And they thought, maybe throwing him over was a dumb idea. So we're going to keep going as hard, as fast as we possibly can. And then they're like, okay, this obviously is not working. So that dude said, we can throw him over. Why not? You ever been in a situation where you're like, well, A through G haven't worked. Well, just try plan H. So like, let's just try Jonah. So they throw him over. Jonah here is basically saying, I would rather drown and I'd rather die than to see God's salvation come to these people. But even in the midst of our disobedience, we disobey God every day when we sin, when we mess up. God can still use your mess ups to bring glory to himself because he's that good. And he's that awesome in the way that he works. If you look at the last verse, it says they offered a sacrifice to who? To the Lord. That's Yahweh, that's God. They offered a sacrifice to God. So they're recognizing that God is the supreme being, at least for now, and they're giving him a sacrifice. That's a crazy step from what they just did. Verse 17, the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. Was it a whale? I don't know. Does it matter? No. Who cares? And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for how many days and how many nights?
3 days and 3 nights.
Awesome. 3 days and 3 nights. Now, is there any other Bible story that we can possibly think of that has to do with 3 days and 3 nights? Anybody? Some guy named Jesus. Y'all heard of this guy? So, awesome. So Justin's teaching about Jesus. That's great. So Jesus died. He literally came to earth. He died for you and for me upon a cross. He was buried, and he was in the ground for 3 days. And then up from the grave, he arose. And then you could sing that hymn on and on. But he was in literally like the depths for 3 straight days, just like Jonah. This is not a coincidence, in my opinion. And so, a cool thing is to see, whenever you're going through something or there's a situation, the first thing you should always ask is, A, does the Bible say anything about this? If the answer is yes, go to the B question, is does Jesus say anything about this? The answer to that is yes. So on the screen here, I have Matthew 12:40. It says, For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Now this is very significant, because what this means right there is that Jesus thought Jonah was real. Jesus thought Jonah actually lived and actually went through this. And so Jesus believed it, and if he told people about it, then I believe it, and I'm claiming that it's real too. Let's dig into chapter 2 real quick. This is a prayer of Jonah. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. Yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head at the root of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with a voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Now, does that sound like a good prayer?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty good. But when I was reading this initially, and when I was younger, every time I would read Jonah chapter 2, I'd be like, good prayer, awesome. He's a changed man. But the more you dive in, the more you look and the more you investigate, we don't really see Jonah repenting in the belly of the fish. In fact, I would argue that it's just the opposite. And this is what Jonah is doing here is called hard-hearted disobedience. Some of you are just hard-hearted punks, right? Like you're disobedient. Like you disobey your parents, maybe you disobey your teachers. But what God wants us to do is to obey those who He has put in charge of us, especially obey what God has done. But the storm that Jonah went through, the fish swallowed him up, are God's signs that He loves him and that He has a purpose for him. So we can learn about Jonah's prayer. We can learn about how to pray and how not to pray. So we don't see Jonah repenting in the fish in the prayer. Like I said, we see heartless disobedience. So look back in chapter 1, verse 2. It says, Arise, go to Nineveh, and call out against it, for the evil has come up before me. So the next thing Jonah does, he gets up and he flees. He doesn't pray. In verse 4, God brings a great wind. He doesn't pray for the wind or anything that the storm that's coming up. Verse 5, the mariners were afraid. Each called out to his God. Jonah doesn't pipe up and say, hey, let me pray to my God, the real God. What does he do? He's sleeping. He goes down and he sleeps. Jonah doesn't pray and he's been thrown overboard. This is what we would call a fish prayer. Sometimes we call on God when we're at the end of our rope, when we're at the very last thing, and God is just like the last thing that I'll try. I'll try this first. Well, that didn't work. I'll try this next. And God is the last thing. God wants to be the first person you call on when you're going through something. Even when something's going good. Call on God. Let's look in verse 2. What do we see Jonah doing? We see him praying to God from the depths. He says, out of the belly of Sheol I cried. And that's basically a way of saying, I'm in a pit. I'm in the darkest possible place that I can be. I'm in death, literally. There's nowhere we can go that God can't hear us. And I'm sure Jonah in his mind is thinking, I'm in the belly of this fish. Can God hear me? Let's look at what Psalm 137 says about this. It says, where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, just like what Jonah's going through, you were there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, Even there your hand shall lead me. I feel like that line is just for Jonah right there. Your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. So we see here that there's nowhere we can go that God can't find us, that God can't rescue us, that God can't save us. In verse 3, who does Jonah hold responsible for this? What does he say? For who? For you. You cast me into the deep. This is your fault, God. You did this. In verse 5, we see an awesome allusion to Jesus' body when he was buried. It says, the weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. Verse 9, this is at the very end of his prayer. He says, I will go make a sacrifice to you. Now, the only place for Jonah to be able to make a proper biblical sacrifice would have been in the temple. The temple is in Jerusalem. He is nowhere close to Jerusalem. So basically he says, hey, God, if you let me out of here, if you let me go home, I'll make a sacrifice to you. Now, doesn't that sound great? Doesn't that sound holy and awesome? But he's wanting to go home. He's avoiding Nineveh again altogether. So he's saying, God, I'll stop doing X, Y, Z if you just let me do blah, blah, blah. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, I've prayed that prayer so many times, it's crazy. God, I'll stop looking at this. I'll stop doing that. Just do this for me. And you know what? Even if God did that for me, I'd still go back to the same sin. I would still struggle with it. It's this fish prayer that we throw up to God. It is not how he desires prayer to be. It's self-centered. It's about me, and it's not about him. So let's look at verse 10, my personal favorite verse in the whole entire book because of one word. And the Lord spoke to the fish and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. Right? I like the word vomit. I think it's pretty cool. My daughter actually vomited 5 times the other night. 2 in the morning. Not cool. But when you see this word, this is like a graphic way of saying he absolutely expelled him from his mouth. Now, in the belly of this, he says he's got stuff wrapped around him. This dude would have been the smelliest, stinkiest, nastiest person you've ever come in contact with. Think of everything that you have to use to digest and everything, and that's all up in him everywhere. And he's spit out onto the sea. He would not have been a very, very smelly person. So the belly of a fish is a perfect place. The belly of a fish is a terrible place to live, but it's a great place to learn. Jonah did not want to share his God to his enemies. He didn't want to share his God, who God was, to his enemies, to the people that he hated, to the people that did a lot of evil stuff. He wanted God for himself. He didn't want him to be shared to anybody else. Again, like I said at the beginning, God's salvation is a free gift to us, and it's also to our enemies. Sometimes we can, in our minds, think about these terrible people that have done terrible things to us. And maybe you're sitting here tonight and you've had somebody do terrible things to you. You've had somebody say terrible things to you. You've had terrible things happen to you. But I want you to know that God's salvation is here tonight. It's for you, and it's a free gift. There's nothing that you have done to earn it. And all you have to do is accept his free gift. So Justin would love to talk about that with you or any of your adults here tonight. If you have a question, please don't leave tonight without asking about what is this free gift of salvation that we can have. So I want to end tonight with a challenge. Every time I speak, I like to initiate a challenge at the end. What can we do with what we have heard? So is God calling you to forgive somebody that you think is unforgivable? Is God calling you to take that leap of faith in your prayer life? Has your prayer life been dead, non-existent, or barely floating? What do you need to do to be able to get out of the fish prayer mindset and have a really good prayer life with God? So let's pray real quick, and we will dismiss into your small groups. God, we thank you for this book of Jonah. We thank you that he was willing to open up who he was to the world. God, it takes a lot to be able to share your faults and how terrible of a messed up person you are. But God, we can learn a lot from this story, and we know that this story ultimately is about you. It's about your children and their disobedience, their hard-hearted disobedience. God, when you say to do something, we run the other way. God, change our hearts. God, give us prayer lives that are flourishing. Give us prayer lives that we come to you in the great times and in the bad as well. God, when we go through the valleys, when we're in the pit, God, raise us up on wings like eagles. God, let us know you're there. If you're struggling in this room tonight with just being in a pit, being in a rut, maybe you feel like you're kind of like Jonah. Your prayers are in the absolute depths, and you feel like God can't hear you. Take a moment and pray to God. Ask God, is there anybody that you are unwilling to forgive for something they've done to you? And as well, ask God to give you a prayer life that would honor Him. Just take a minute. We pray that you would hear the cries of your children. And we know that you are a good God, and you are sovereign, and you orchestrate everything for your good. So, God, use this story to help us to look to you. And God, when we're tempted to run the other way when you tell us to do something, God, may we press in no matter how hard, no matter how difficult it may seem, no matter how crazy of an ask that you give to us. God, may we fulfill it. May we say yes to you. It's in your name we pray.